He has leather-bound books, and he also has maps of his world on his website that you can buy. A very thorough individual. Like, if you want to get into his worlds, I feel like you really have the opportunity to. Like, he has, like, board games. If you jive with the worlds he's created, he's just allowed opportunities for you to really connect with it.
Yeah. All right, welcome to another episode of David and Gabby's Book Club. I'm David. I've just recently started reading as of summer of 23, and this is my beautiful wife, Gabby, who's been reading pretty much her whole life. This is a podcast to where we just hang out, talk about books and book-related topics. What do we have for today?
Yeah, today we're diving into Brandon Sanderson.
B. Sandy.
As we've started referring to him as.
It's less to write on my notes, B. Sandy. So I don't know if he's approved of that, but I apologize if you're watching for some reason or watching our early episodes. And
anyways, we have not read any of his books, but we want to. And so this is just us talking about Brandon Sanderson from a completely outsider's perspective. We've heard a lot about him, so we're just going to look into who he is. We're going to talk about why we think there's so much hype about him. Like, why have we heard about it, him and all of his books?
It seems like people are just raving about him. So it's like, from an outsider's point of view,
why?
Who is this guy?
Yeah.
Like, what is going on with him? So
right. Let's get into it. So, B. Sandy.
Well, just a clarification, we kind of talked about it. It's an outsider's point of view. Everyone's talking about him, raving about him. So that's why we're kind of wanting to look into him. The reason we haven't heard of or read him up until this point is mainly because I mentioned it a little in the intro. I just entered this reading space just at the end of summer 23. So that's when I started reading, like, period. I never read before that, really, much of anything. So I'm very new to the space. And then Gabby, I don't know if you want to talk about your...
Oh, yeah, sure. I loved reading all throughout grade school, middle school, high school. I went to a sporting event with a book. Loved it. Always had something with me. When I hit college, I really got out of the space of reading, partially because of workload, right? You have to read a lot for college. And other, like, I was just busy. It felt like, now looking back at it, I had time for naps, so I had time to read. But another part of it was I had a hard time figuring out what to read next. So I really got out of reading, got out of the habit of reading, didn't really pick it back up, like maybe a book here and there. But when David got back into reading a couple years ago, that's when my interest was piqued as well. And it's been downhill since.
Well, also, you kind of, like, in college and after college and, like, earlier in our marriage, you were more reading, like, self-help books because you were like, that's what adults do.
Yeah.
So you kind of... That's another reason why you kind of fell off, is because you were like, you stopped reading fantasy and fiction and stuff. You were like, I need to read
adult
mature books. Yeah. So now that I've gotten back into reading, you've gotten more back into reading because you went back to the fantasy fiction, more fun read. So I'm brand new to the space of reading in general. Late summer 23. You're, like, just recently re-entering the fantasy space. So even, like, before 23, you weren't even following any fantasy or fiction or anything like that. So we're both kind of new in that sense to this. That's why we haven't read Brandon Sanderson or even heard of him really until recently, just seeing a bunch of stuff about him. Another reason is, like, we're wanting to decide what to read next. And Brandon Sanderson's stuff is kind of like, we're hearing a lot about him. We're seeing a lot of stuff about him. So we're like, let's check him out, see who this guy is, and see if that's kind of what we want to lean towards next. So, but yeah.
Who is Brandon Sanderson, David?
So Brandon Sanderson, if you don't know, is a fantasy author.
He's written a ton of books.
Yeah, he's written a ton of stuff.
Just, like, pulling up his website. I don't know the total, but a lot.
So he's resurfaced just recently because He just released his newest book in his Stormlight archive, which people apparently like has a big following. People love it. And it was, I think, called Wind and Truth. Yeah, Wind and Truth. It just released just last month in December of 2024. That's why he's kind of resurfaced and everyone's talking about him. He just released a brand new book in the Stormlight archive, which has been going since, I think it was like 2013 or something like that is when the first one came out. So it's been 10 years now that series has been going. I think it was like the 5th or 6th book in that series. So he's known for that. He's also known for Mistborn, which he actually recommends as a good starting point for his books because it's like a fantasy adventure epic, but it's shorter than the Stormlight archive in terms of like each book of the Stormlight archive is like huge. And Mistborn is like a normal, like it's still long, but it's normal book size. And then I think this is, again, this is just from like quick research, but I think the reason he like popped off was he actually finished the Wheel of Time series. So like I think there's like 14 or 15, something crazy
in the whole series.
Yeah, the Wheel of Time, and I think the author like passed away, and Brandon Sanderson was asked to come in and finish. So he wrote like the last 3 or 4 books of that series.
Oh man,
that's another one that I kind of want to read because a lot of people like have the Wheel of Time as like top tier. One of the best fantasies of all time. At least from his bio, it seemed like that was one of the first books that he wrote, was finishing like the greatest fantasy series of all time.
Yeah.
Like one of. So I think that kind of puts you on the map and people wanting to see what you're
doing for yourself. Yeah. Like if you can finish this super popular series, what are you doing?
And I think the Stormlight archive is what he started with. Again, these are just from what I've been reading or researching.
Right. And like to go back to that, researching, like putting in the time to figure out what we're going to read next, because I should have said this earlier, but what you consume and who you hang out with, I think is like who you become. Right. And so I just want to be intentional about what we're consuming.
Yeah.
If you look into the book, look into the author, think that they're going to have similar morals to you. They're not going to write certain things. And it sounds like a really good story that a lot of people like. I think you're less likely to DNF it, right?
Yeah. DNF meaning
do not finish.
We were watching a video the first time and they're talking about DNFs and Gabby was like, I have no idea what a DNF is. I'm like,
what is a DNF?
A DNF. I don't know if it's a gaming term, but I feel like a lot of those types of things, like I saw a bumper sticker the other day, it was like AFK. Or something like that, and you were like, I have no idea what that means. Like it's away from keyboard, like because when you're in the middle of the game, you're just like AFK. They're AFK if there's not much. Anyways, so I had to explain to her what DNF meant. Like I hadn't even been in the reading world, and I knew what DNF was. Did not finish is what DNF means for those who don't know. So if you DNF a book, you didn't finish the book. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to DNF the next read. So we're kind of looking into
what we're going to read next.
Yeah. But yeah, another unique thing that I found with him was that all of his books are it's called the Cosmere. And apparently that's kind of almost like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like all those movies are individual movies, individual series, but they're all in the same universe. They're all interconnected in some way. All of his books, well, not all of them, but like most of his books are in the Cosmere. So they're kind of all in the same universe on different worlds or whatever.
Which is brilliant because if I think about it, my favorite books, I would totally pick up another book, maybe of a different storyline, but in the same world, in the same universe. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And it means, I don't know if it's the same universe versus the same world. Like if you'd still have to build as much.
So I think that's the hardest Stormlight.
I was just going to say, like, picking up a new fantasy series, one of the hardest things about it is the world building aspect. You know, it's necessary. It's good. It's just, it feels like
it's something you have to read and have to do, but it's not exciting.
It's not the story, right?
Mm-hmm. I think they're on different worlds, just in the same universe. So, like, the Stormlight Archive is on Earth, for example, and Mistborn is on Venus. Okay. So I think there might still be world building, which those aren't on Earth and Venus. They're
So what
made
makes
up
them in the
worlds.
same universe? I guess you haven't read them.
I don't know. But apparently it's like
Like
so,
if you swapped a world. Interesting.
yeah, I don't
That
know.
is interesting.
I mean, I don't know for a fact that every single one of them still has that world
I
building.
wonder if like some of the like basic truths or like the way things work are the same
Or like,
throughout.
or maybe they like mention the world or something. It's like, did you hear what's happening on Mars?
Oh yeah, maybe.
Something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's basically a quick rundown
Of
of
who I
who he is.
pulled up his website and
Uh-huh.
looked at his bio. He's a professor.
Oh, he is a professor currently?
I think so. Like at BYU, I think he teaches I don't know what class, but I think he teaches some sort of literary class. And
I mean,
I also thought
that
it was
makes
kind
sense.
of funny. He started going to college for chemistry
Yeah, to become a doctor.
to become a doctor. And like took a break, went on a trip, and then came back and realized that he missed writing and
Not the human body.
not the human body, not chemistry. Didn't want to become a doctor, so that's crazy. He also had a mention in there like it wasn't his mom's favorite, and I could see that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, becoming a writer is not really lucrative unless you're blow up like Brandon Sanderson has.
Right.
So it's like it's not very. It's hard to become successful in writing. It's like there's a lot of people who like become writers and they're not full time paid to be writers.
Right.
I feel like.
Yeah. So why do we think that there's so much hype about him?
I think the biggest thing is one, he finished the Wheel of Time like that.
Put him on the map.
Yeah, but that's not really something everyone can do. Yeah, it's not really like a tip of like, oh, if you're an upcoming author, go write for one of the greatest fantasy series of all time. Easy.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else he did, like he has a very good like he is present on social media as I think one of the biggest things. He has his own YouTube channel which he posts on regularly. He's got a podcast which he posts on regularly. And not only that, but he's like transparent with his work on that. So I saw a lot of like videos of like updates on where he's at with writing or publishing Wind and Truth that just came out in December. So it's like, so he's talking about like the whole process and stuff. And I'm sure, like, I didn't go and watch all of them, but I'm sure he goes in and is like, there was a delay here, or this reason why. So we're pushing back the date. Like,
which
so
builds anticipation.
Yeah. Well, one, it builds anticipation, but two, it builds trust, like that communication with people. So if someone's wanting a product and that person is constantly giving them updates on what's going on, one, it builds hype, but two, it builds trust. So like now, even if it's delayed or a long time, it's like, I trust him and I'm still going to support him and I'm still going to buy it because everyone struggles type thing. But like, if it was just delayed and you've heard nothing except for the fact that now you're waiting 6 more months, then it breeds frustration instead of like trust and stuff like that. So that's what I think. And I think a big thing is, and this is a big reason why we might want to read his books, is I don't want to say known for, but like he's very vocal about the fact that like he doesn't put like explicit like sexual content in his books. So I think there might be language from what I've seen in like gore, but in terms of like sexual content that's happening like on the screen, like on the page,
it's all off screen.
It's all like happens off screen, I think. And that's like, for us, that's a big, oh, if that's the case, then I can trust and read all of his books.
Right.
Type thing.
This last year, I read the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. Loved the first couple books. I think it was written for young adults, and no content in the first few books, but then in the last couple books there was, and it was just so disappointing.
Yeah. Well, and you stopped her newest series because it was just
too much. Like, you can skip stuff, but you end up missing stuff, and if that's not something you want to read, it just completely ruins the series for you. So don't want to be disappointed. I also, like, there were just some comments on Google that he ends books really well.
Oh, really?
I guess is what somebody was saying.
So
that
we need to get
sometimes
all of the books in the trilogy before. Is that what that means?
I don't know. They just said, I think the comment essentially said his endings are complete, sometimes predictable, but like always fun to read. So he ends on a good note versus sometimes books have a really good story and build up well, but then they end abruptly or
Yeah.
it just doesn't feel like a good stopping point. So I guess he does that really well. Just in terms of what he's doing, I pulled up his website and it seems like he's made the barrier to enter his books very low. Like you ask, like, where do I start? He has an answer for you. He even has books for people who like fantasy more, books for people who don't like fantasy more. This is my like young adult content. Any question that is going to pop into your mind, or at least any question that popped into my mind, I found the answer to. It's so easy to find answers about his books.
Yeah.
Without feeling
really...
like it was spoiled. Like, I have no idea.
Yeah. He reduces and takes away a lot of the friction that you might have in terms of like getting started with all of his collection or books. Because that's like, I guess, one of the downsides to like the Cosmere, having all the books in a single universe. Because like then you feel, and brings up the question, is like, well, where do I start? Then, because you can't just start with a random trilogy if it's in the middle of, I need to read these trilogies and these series first to understand what's going on here. So like, where do I start? For example, if you're wanting to start with the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you're wanting to watch it from like the beginning till Endgame, it's like there's kind of an order you should watch them in, type thing. And so you can't just like watch all of the Thors and then all of the Iron Mans, and then like you've kind of like a special order to that. And so that might not be the case with Brandon Sanderson, but like that, the fact that all of them are in that universe will raise that question, is like, where do I start?
Or just that he has I don't think all of his books are in the Cosmere.
Yeah, not all of them are.
But on his website, it even had books that are in the Cosmere and then books in maybe another universe. I don't know. Huh. He just had different sections.
Yeah.
It made it feel very simple. I also got the vibe that his following is very dedicated. Just as a side note, he has leather-bound books on his website, and they're so expensive. They're like $125. One of them was $250. And it has a note at the top that there's a limit of 2. So not only is he selling these like leather-bound, I think they're signed copies of his books for so much money, but he has to like limit people to only buying 2. And
that's crazy.
I know. I saw that and I was like, are you serious? It was like, so the vibe that I got from that
collecting
is
insane, I guess.
And that his following is apparently like pretty intense.
Yeah.
That you're willing to spend that much money on a book is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Good for you. Good for him. And he also has maps of his world on his website that you can buy. A very thorough individual. Like, if you want to get into his worlds, I feel like you really have the opportunity to. It kind of reminds me of like the wizarding world of Harry Potter. There's not a theme park that you can go to for this, but he has like board games. So it just like, if you jive with the worlds he's created, he's just allowed opportunities for you to really connect with it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Which, I mean, like, all of this is just, I don't know, I'm like, I feel like it's naive to say like this is what all authors should do. But I have 3 things that I feel like he's done really well. Okay. That not just authors, but like anyone who's trying to build anything, like this is how you do it. I feel like the 3 things.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me.
So one is social media.
Okay.
Like, he is on social media. Like, the biggest thing for anything is having an audience to sell to, or like to build.
Which is an interesting concept, because I feel like that's usually what the publishers are in charge of, right?
Yeah.
I guess I'm not super familiar with like authors and
I don't know that whole process, but like, I mean, I'm sure he sells more books because he's on social media. He's on YouTube.
Absolutely.
People
he has like
connect with him.
600,000 followers on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people.
Crazy. Well, not only that, but like he shows up on other people's YouTube channels. So he's like a very accessible person. So I've seen him on like multiple other fantasy YouTube channels and podcasts. And even like the YouTube channels you got into a while back was the Nerd of the Rings. Like he just like talks of like if you want to go deep into Middle Earth and that whole world, watch the Nerd of the Rings.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's fun.
It's so
fun
good.
if you have some time.
But
to go.
He even like showed up on his podcast, or not his podcast, his YouTube channel to talk about Tolkien. And I'm sure like part of it is strategy, yes, but also like it seems like he just enjoys talking about fantasy stuff, you know? It makes it very easy to like him and want
because you know him.
Yeah, because you know him. And he's like one of the nerds, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Instead of like all you know about the author is his name on the front cover and a little portrait picture in the back. It's a little different than that. Yeah. And being able to connect with him on the sense of seeing him interact with these YouTubers, it just builds that trust. And I think that's huge. And same thing with the podcast. So that's one. And just building an audience in general. Because I feel like it's hard to break through the noise anywhere. Like even like podcasting, like I don't even know how many people are going to be listening to this podcast, but like anything is just hard to break through the noise. And I feel like even more so with like writing books. Because think how many books are out there. It's insane.
Yeah, that's true.
There's so many books that like we've never even heard of.
Right.
Or I bet you there's so many that like don't even make the cut to any publishers or like hardly sell any. And they could be some of the best books ever written. But nobody's buying it because nobody knows the person, nobody's heard of them, nobody's like,
right,
you know, and a lot of the publishers,
well, and you can only consume so much. Like I only have 24 hours in a day and I have a job and I have a family and
yep and a lot of the publishers, like again, this is for anything, any industry, but like from the publisher's point of view, writing another Stephen King novel or another Brandon Sanderson novel or another XYZ novel, even if it's Stephen King's worst book,
it's gonna sell
the fact
better.
that it has Stephen King's name on it, the risk level in terms of publishing it and spending the money to publish it and get it in stores drops significantly because they know that it's going to sell.
Interesting.
If a brand new author comes, it could be like a really good book. It could be better than 75% of Stephen King's novels, and the publisher says no thanks because they don't want to risk it. It's like, yes, it could make them a lot of money, but it also could flop. They have no idea because it's a brand new person.
Or even like,
it's just hard to break through the noise.
I don't know much about like the publishing world, but self-publishing is a thing.
Yeah, but even self-publishing, like how...
Right, but if you have like 600,000 people who are willing to subscribe to your YouTube channel, there's a lot. Like if you can't get a publisher to take a book, but you're pretty confident in your book, you could probably get at least like 1,000 people to buy it.
Oh yeah, it's like
right, and then if you really want a publisher to take up your book after that point,
then you can show them,
you have the proof to say
this sells.
Yeah,
because I mean, Daniel Green, I mentioned him in a previous podcast, is like, he's published a few books and they've done really well. And I guarantee you...
What did Daniel Green write?
I don't know the exact name. He's written like a few smaller books, and then he just started another like Neon Ghosts or something like that. But like he's sold, like they've sold really well and people like them. Okay. And it's like, if he was just a random dude who wrote a book and self-published it, I don't know if it would do very well. But because he has a huge YouTube channel, he talked about it, he is like open with the process of doing it, people like him. They're like, I like Daniel Green, he's hilarious, he's an awesome guy. I watch every one of his videos. He comes out with a book, I'm gonna try it. I may or may not like it, but I'm gonna buy it and I'm gonna try it because it's Daniel Green.
Yeah.
And like Haley Pham is also starting to write a book. And it's like, I guarantee, like, it could be like a very mid Like she said, it's like a romance novel, and it can be a very mid romance novel, and it still would sell well because her whole audience like has followed her journey on reading, and is now following her journey on writing that book, and they like Haley Pham, so they're all gonna try it. It's like why would I not?
Right. And I guess like the true test is if they'd buy another.
Yeah,
right?
but like I feel like that's just the biggest hurdle for like a lot
to
of
get
people is
to
just
even
get
have a chance.
yeah, it gives you a chance.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Like again, it's naive for me to tell authors what to do because I'm
Not an author.
not an author and I've just started reading. But like I'm just very passionate about like social media followings and stuff. It's like it's so worth it because there's just a lot of opportunity and like growing an audience and I mean the second part would be like transparency. Like if you're not yourself on social media, it doesn't even matter in the first place because you're just building a fake audience on a fake identity. But like he was like giving updates on his writing and stuff. That builds trust. Granted, I think like if he didn't do all of these things, he probably would still be successful. But the fact
because he has
it's like exponentially more.
Okay, so number 1 was social media. Number 2 is transparency. What's number 3?
I think the fact that he has openly stated he doesn't have sexual content in his books has helped. Like I'm not saying that everyone should write clean books because it sells better than having sex in your books, but coming out and saying
like being on one
specifically
side
picking a side and announcing it basically being very public on the fact that he's on this side has helped. Like that's a part of like niching down, you know. It's like there's an audience of people who want to read really good fantasy novels who don't want to read about sex. So if they've got a choice of 5 different books, 5 different series, and none of them have ratings because there's no ratings for books. Like there's another topic for another day, but like there's no ratings on them, so you have no idea. You're probably going to gravitate towards Brandon Sanderson because he is publicly like he's vocal about the fact that like he doesn't see a point in writing sex in his books.
Right.
And so you're like, well, I know these are safe to read and I could really enjoy them and I'm not going to have to deal with that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so I think that has so like niching down even more. It's like not just fantasy, not just fiction, but like clean fantasy fiction. That's still for adults, but
right. Yeah, no, that's huge because even though it's an adult book, he even has a comment on I think the Mistborn series on his website that they were written for adults, but that the content is appropriate for like later teens.
Yeah, like which is the Lord of the Rings.
Right. Which it's helpful to know some things about what you're about to, dedicate time to. How long does it take to finish an average fantasy book?
Long time,
right? Like hours of your life. And so
twice the hours for me. I'm a very slow reader.
He picks up a lot of things. Like he remembers a lot of details.
But like you look at the audiobook length, like the one like listening to it at one time speed and then like add like 10% of the time to that and that's my reading speed.
Right. But going back to there's only so much time to consume things and there's so many books to choose from. To be able to say this, I know that this author meets these criteria for books that I'm interested in is huge and it's hard to find.
Well, not only that, but like, for example, with like Throne of Glass, you're invested.
Right.
Like, because it wasn't in the first book. It was like in like the 4th or 5th book.
Right.
And so you're like 4 or 5 books into the series.
And so I want to know what happened.
And so now like you're so invested in it, you don't want to stop, but at the same time you don't want to deal with that stuff.
Right.
So
and
it's but having that guarantee almost of like, okay, I can spend and invest a lot of my emotional and like time investment into this series and it's gonna be clean.
Right.
So just having that, again, this is a whole like business thing, but like the fear of, well, if I niche down that far I could lose this audience. It's like, well, yeah, but
more people
in that you're hitting are gonna want your stuff because it's so personal to them. in terms of what they want. So,
right.
And then I guess it's 4 things, but the other thing would be just reducing the friction. Like on his website, he says like
Barrier to entry is low.
the barrier to entry is like so low because he's helped you navigate what to read for his stuff, and he's very honest. Like at least he seems very honest about his own books. It's like
right. I mean, and remember, we've not read his books.
Yeah, no, we haven't. This is all from outsiders.
Outsider's perspective. Just like doing some research about what to read next. He seems like a really good author to follow. Seems like.
But yeah, I think what he's done has just been great. Like,
just from a consumer's perspective, I wouldn't mind other authors having certain standards that they stick to, that they tell you about. If they have multiple books, where to start, like make the barrier to entry low, help me learn about you in like the time that I have to learn about you.
And I guess for me, I have more of the perspective of like me doing freelance and trying to build my own business. So I have that kind of perspective of like, wow, this is kind of like what he's done is kind of textbook in terms of like building an audience on social media, having the transparency, being yourself, reducing the friction and barrier to entry, niching down to a very niche audience of people to like reach to. It's just, the more I've looked into him, the more I'm like, he knows what he's doing.
But like on the flip side, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have an author who's trying to get into the space for people to learn about them, the time commitment that Sanderson puts in is enormous. Yeah, I am sure. And I don't think that you'd necessarily have to reach his volume to even enter the thought process of what he's doing, though. Yeah. You know, like just starting on one platform, setting out your values, letting your readers know what to expect from you. Having those things easily accessible, I think, would be huge. Yeah. Building a following, I mean, that takes work. And I do think it would be worth it.
It's always weird because I'm sure if he doesn't, he has the money to just like pay someone else to help him film, edit, so that all he does is like show up and talk for the videos, which that's always tough because it's like, well, he can do that because he has the money to spend for, I don't know. It's just a hard balance. It's like that. It's like a double-edged sword, or I forgot what the proper word is. But Catch-22. It's like you need money to put out. Well, you don't need.
Money helps you grow.
Money helps you grow and put out a ton more content with less friction, but at the same time, you can't have that money to do that until you've grown.
Right. But I mean, there's definitely an element. I'm not old, but the older I get, the more I'm realizing.
Yeah, you're not even 30.
Yeah, I'm not even 30. I'm almost 30. If I want to do something and it seems like it's going to take a fair amount of effort to do it, my immediate reaction is, can I do this without it taking that much effort? And if I take that road of whatever I'm trying to accomplish, taking less effort, it never turns out as well as if I take a little extra time, put in a little extra effort. I feel like whatever I'm pursuing ends up better. So I'm sure for authors who are trying to put out a book, I'm sure some of them are thinking, I have the book written. Why would I take the time, effort, and energy to like build up an audience? Like I have the product. I think that it would help significantly. I think it would be worth the effort. Yeah. My 2 cents, but I'm also not an author, so take it for what it's worth.
He's done really good, and I haven't even read his books. I don't even know if they're good. They could be trash. I'm just joking. They're obviously quality. If he's like, you could do all of this perfectly, and if your product's not good, it's not going to sell. It doesn't matter. So I'm sure they're really good. But yeah, because of that, we literally watched one of his videos on like where to start if you wanted to read Brandon Sanderson. And one of his suggestions was starting with the Mistborn trilogy, the original Mistborn trilogy. Yeah. So I think the first book's called The Final Empire.
I'm not even sure.
I think that's what it's called. We already got it. But yeah, so we're going to read that next. And then we are going to talk about Mistborn, The Final Empire, I believe it's called. And so If you want to join us to read it, you are more than welcome to
Be a part
join.
of the club.
Be a part of the club, the book club.
Yeah.
The David and Gabby's book
Read
club.
it with us.
Yeah. So if you want to read it with us, you're more than welcome to. If you already have it, to read it again or read it for the first time. If it's been sitting on your shelf for months or years and you haven't read it, join us.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to pick it up, we'll have links in the description for where you can get Mistborn to join us.
Or you can put it on hold at the library and
or
come back in the future. That will be our pass.
Or get or get it in the library. Yeah, we love the library.
Yeah.
We get the library books all the time, and we're using Libby a lot too. So that's a solid one. Like literally this bookshelf that you see in the corner, like that's all of the actual physical books we have, because we were like we're turning into minimalists.
Yeah,
we're like,
it's just hard to find space to store everything.
Yeah, so we're more of like either we get it digitally or get it from the library or Libby. So you don't have to use the links in the description. But if you do, that helps the channel out. It doesn't cost anything extra for you. The book is still the same price, but if you use those links, we'll get a small kickback for referring you. So we got all of them. If you're wanting digital, audio, physical copies, all the links. Can't wait to talk Mistborn with you guys.
Excited for it. See you in the next one.